Welcome to the Pulpit Porch, previously known as the Small Church Podcast, where church leaders, pastors, and community builders come together to have real, honest conversations about faith, ministry, and life. We believe that leadership in the church is more than just sermons and services. It's about the heart behind the ministry, the community that we serve, and the challenges that we face together.
I'm Robert, and I'm excited to join you each week as we dive into practical tips, big ideas, and meaningful conversations that will inspire and equip you as a leader, no matter the size of your church.
And I'm Tony, with a passion for storytelling, leadership, and vision. I'll be here to help uncover those deeper truths behind ministry life. Just like a front porch on a warm summer evening, we'll sit and talk about the things that matter most in life.
While we may occasionally stray off script, one thing's for sure. We always keep it fun, entertaining, and most importantly, grounded in truth. So pull up a chair, grab a glass of sweet tea, and join us on the porch.
Let's get started together. All right, so welcome in. You might be a little shocked having heard that intro that the big news of the week is that we did officially change the name from the Small Church Podcast to the Pulpit and Porch. And we spent about 45 minutes recording that new intro there. We spent more time recording that intro than we did recording this actual episode.
Probably. But hey, it's done. It's good. And this is we've been doing this for a few months now without our good friend, but this is only the second week that we've had a different intro, I believe. And I think since the last time we were there, it was good. So excited to be able to. I know Bruce was also interested in changing some names and stuff like that. And so excited to kind of carry on some of those thoughts that he was planting in our brain and going from there.
Yeah. And do want to apologize to all of our faithful listeners out there that last week was the first week in a year and a half of doing this show that we did not have an episode. So for those of you that were anxiously awaiting the new drop of the episode last Tuesday, you're still waiting, and because it never happened. And just want to apologize to everyone for that. Life just happened and we couldn't get it done. The plan for that week is that I wanted to put out the broadcast of Bruce's memorial service for all of our listeners around the country that weren't able to be there in person. And when we went, the audio quality of that was just, it was not understandable. And so we will, in our episode notes for this episode in the liners, we'll put the link to the live stream video that is still out there that you can watch. But I'll warn you, the audio is really, really bad on that. So, but we want to make that available. That was our plan for last week. I was on vacation last week. You were extremely busy with life and a lot of the things
recovery efforts here in our area.
That we finally just got to a place of saying it's not happening this week. It's just not happening. And so, but we do want to pick up our conversation that we left off on the last time. That it has been a couple of weeks. We were talking before the show in our pre-show production meeting, whatever you want to call that, which is just more of a time for us to sit and hang out and
kind of catching up.
We were talking about that we're now 4 weeks from the disaster that struck our region. And I know for a lot of our listeners that are in other parts of the country, you've moved on with life and probably haven't even thought about what was going on. I know we made national news in our region here for a couple of days, maybe even a week or two. We're still occasionally popping in with debates and conflict and controversy surrounding the presidential campaign and who came to visit and who just flied over and who made ridiculous comments and who made no comments at all. And so we're eking into the national headlines some, but it's more about the political issues than it is about the people that are here in our area. But for those that live here in the Appalachian region, in Western North Carolina and Northeast Tennessee, that was the heaviest impact from Helene, we're still living it every single day. And the recovery efforts are still ongoing. The rebuilding will be taking place for a long, long time. And so we wanted to continue the conversation that we started a few weeks ago when this was all fresh to everyone, but continue that up with some updates on where things are now, and also just finish some of our thoughts and ideas that we had a couple weeks ago.
Well, and I just think in chatting before too, there's going to be some new thoughts and ideas. One of the things that, we've said is you just can't mentally prepare for something that you would never expect. I don't know how many hurricanes happen in a mountain region. You expect it at the beach and things. And by the way, that did not make what happened in Tampa and what hit and devastated Florida just mere days after any less traumatic, any less difficult and heartbreaking. It's when I lived in Florida, I expected hurricanes. I mean, I expected to do that. Every several times a year, I remember sitting in staff meetings and different things, and I'm going, "Are y'all evacuating?" And they're like it's not even a category 1, Robert. I mean, it's not even fully leaned into what's considered an official storm. And so, I was just nervous and I was unaware. And so as it went and our time there grew longer, I was able to go, oh, okay, hey, this probably isn't going to affect us the way that I would have thought it was 10 years ago, being from the mountains. You spend your life as an elementary kid in Alabama, getting the biggest book out of your desk and going and sitting in the hallway to protect yourself from tornadoes, because apparently, English is what will save your life in that moment. And so it's just one of those things, like when you're unaware. And I think it's something too. It's like, if you're listening and you're not in our region, it's okay that your life has gone back, because I'll promise you, there's something that has happened. And especially if you're from Midwest or West Coast and you face these terrible tornadoes and earthquakes and all these things that happen in those regions that don't necessarily happen in our Northeast Tennessee, somewhat protected space from a lot of these natural disasters. I mean, we've kept up with it on our side, but our life starts to get back to, because we've got to go to work and we've got to do things. And, our kids don't have to play baseball or play basketball and things like that, but our kids do these things. And so lives go back to normal. But I think it is something that, if we've experienced tragedy, it gives us a chance to empathize a little more with people, and to kind of that prayer part, which you and I both believe greatly is a key part of what's going on here. And there's been seasons that you and I've talked about that our involvement early on was probably a lot of prayer. Then there was some weeks in the middle, those, into week 1, into kind of early week 4, that you just this ability to really get hands on. And now those things are starting to stabilize, and there's a lot of opportunities to serve. Ton of work still to do, but it's where we've got opportunity. We've got a little more clarity of direction, and I know you're going to talk about that, because you've got a couple of thoughts and some stories and things that you can throw in there in a few minutes. So yeah, it's a very different space, but the world's even our world, if you aren't in a spot that's totally affected, there's a lot of people that are just starting to live life normal again. And those are people that are 20 minutes away.
Yeah. And yet the reminders of it are everywhere.
Oh my goodness.
We went Tuesday night is my wife and my date night. Every Tuesday, a non-negotiable date night. And so I asked her what she wanted to do for our date night. And she loves the leaf change. And we live in one of the most beautiful areas in the world.
My drive to work's pretty amazing for about the next 3 or 4 weeks.
It really is. And one of the most beautiful places that we love to drive was the 15-minute drive from our house to downtown Irwin along the Nolichucky River. That road is now gone.
Yeah.
The road is gone. And we would make that. I mean, we would seriously just drive back and forth that it's 15 minutes from here to your church in downtown Irwin, taking this road that is now gone. And don't know when it will be rebuilt. So now if we're going to your church on a Sunday morning, what used to take us 15 minutes now takes us 45 each way because of that. But so we decided that we wanted to go look at leaves. And so we grabbed some drinks from a local coffee shop and hopped in the car and went for a drive. And we weren't really sure where we were going to go, but I knew I wanted to go someplace beautiful. And so we headed towards Irwin, down the old Irwin Highway, but then we turned off in Unicoi, heading towards Beulah-Dean, North Carolina, and went past the national park and all of that area there. And we got up through, probably 20 minutes outside of Unicoi, Tennessee, crossed over into the North Carolina line for about 10, 15 miles. I tried to I apologized to her. I said, I tried to take you to see something beautiful. And instead, we've seen destruction unlike anything. It was unfathomable, Robert, what we saw there. Could not believe what we saw. For a good 15, 20 miles of state highway there, the entire hillsides, mountainsides on both sides decimated. We even said, my wife finally said, I wonder if a tornado came through here, because there was no other explanation for what we were witnessing. Thousands upon thousands of trees that had been there for centuries, probably, it looked like, uprooted. And I mean, it was treacherous even driving on the roads, even though they've cut the roads to make them passable, because you were having to slow down and go into the center line to avoid destroying your car with massive trees that were cut in half to provide a small pathway through a road. And this continued for miles and miles and miles. I was in utter shock at what we were seeing just last night, a month removed from the storm coming through.
Yeah, I mean, water, one, is just an absolute crazy force of nature that I don't think a lot of us fully understand until we get to a moment that we can see what's happening there and what's going on. But yeah, North Carolina really, we talk about the two areas in Tennessee that are very close to us, kind of Carter County and Unicoi County. And as bad as Carter County is, the people who have been up in those spaces doesn't even compare to Unicoi. And it's not a competition, by the way. It's just things are really rough, hit hard in Unicoi. But man, you cross that state line and anybody will tell you North Carolina absolutely just got devastated.
Yeah,
and
we drove through Asheville twice in the past week, and that community is still reeling and will be for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I think I saw on the news yesterday morning, which would have been a Tuesday, and so just so you know, it's a couple days shy, 3 days shy of 4 full weeks, and it was just one of those things of like, I think everybody in Unicoi that can get power and water now have power and water. Some friends of mine, I think I might have mentioned before, their great grandmother lives up on the mountain on the North Carolina side, and they were told it was going to be 6 months. And I don't know who those people are, but crazy thankful for the men and women, the linemen that have been in here working ridiculous hours.
And we've been seeing crews from other regions, other states coming in to help with these efforts. It's really been a testament to the power of the human spirit and cooperation and love and compassion that we've seen in this area. And even now, 4 weeks later, you can't drive in this area without seeing a caravan of military vehicles coming through. We are driving through on my way back from basketball practice yesterday and got stopped by a convoy of dump trucks, about 7 dump trucks that were from one company, and the company was from out of state, like from somewhere in Missouri or something.
You and I were driving through about the same time because I got behind those same 7 dump trucks on the interstate. Maybe they were coming back the other way as you were heading out. I was coming the other way, but yeah, it's been crazy. My brother-in-law and nephew are linemen, and I just know that my sister and my nephew's wife and their kids and those types of things, they've had to live in this space of their family being gone, and they're out in these storms and they're working, and they're actually not here. Ironically enough, they're pretty close to here. But things were expected to be really bad in Florida. And so they had been shipped out before our stuff happened down to like Tampa and things like that. And so they could have been in their own back door, but kind of backyard, but instead they're hours and hours away. I think they're both back home now, but it's tough. And those are things that, like, your family is gone and you know that your family's missing each other, and they don't, because I don't like being away from my wife, and I don't like being away from my kids. I like being a part of what they're doing. I understand that, like, in my life, I've had jobs where you've got to do those things sometimes and you go, but this isn't like a business trip that they're gone for a week, staying in a hotel and, going to see a couple of shows or something like that and sitting in meetings during the day. These are like, they're gone weeks upon weeks upon weeks, and like, they don't know when they're coming home, and and just in full transparency, I mean, there's a lot of hostility. There's people who are mad and angry that want things, and you get mad enough. I mean, people kind of make some threats and get pretty rough out there. And so it's not just always an easy space, but I'm thankful, for God's protection of them and how he's watched out. And I'm thankful for their heart to be servants, to go and to walk into spaces that are really complicated. So.
Yeah. So, Robert, we've got a couple things that I want to talk about today on the show with our listeners. And one of those we touched on a little bit before we started recording, and that's this dilemma between the need for the community and the need for self-care. And we have talked so many times on this show about the importance of self-care in ministry for leaders of any kind. And one of the things that we've been talking about is that we're 4 weeks into this now. And for a lot of people, it has been nonstop, that the relief efforts, recovery efforts, rebuilding efforts have not taken a break. And extremely commendable the way that some people have dove straight in headfirst into helping. You've got people like my wife, who would be out 24/7 helping if they were physically able to. And the guilt of not helping when they're not helping is kind of overwhelming. That we went on vacation last week, a vacation that was planned for 8 months, had been reserved and planned for 8 months. And my wife really was considering not going because there was so much to be done here. And finally, when I got her in the car to leave, she said, I'm so thankful to be able to just get out and unplug from everything going on away. I think that it's going to help me to be able to come back. But then some real boundaries had to be set within her team that she's been leading and working with and all this, and saying that life has to go on. We still have jobs to do. She's in real estate, and they were saying we're the brokest real estate agents in the world because we're not selling any houses, because we're out here serving. And so they've had to come in and say, we're dedicating 1 day a week that we're not working in the office. We're going and doing recovery restoration projects. And you were talking about this that in your role as a pastor and a community leader in the hardest hit community, that 4 weeks in, it's exhausting, it's overwhelming, and yet the work, there's still so much to be done. So how do you balance that burden for hurting people and need out there, and yet there has to be some element of self-care or you're not going to make it?
Yeah. And I'm a touch like Amanda. Like I feel a lot more, and I'm not saying she and I mentally process this the same way. And I will say my approach to it is not probably always healthy. But for me, I'm better mentally when I'm out there serving than when I'm in the office or I'm doing my job and those types of things. And so I understand that it doesn't help a lot of things on the other side. But yeah, I want to say for sure that there are people who, man, they are absolute road warriors in this thing, and they have been amazing, and they have stepped in, and they continue to step in, and they carry a heavy weight. And I just love how God's wired some people to function that way. The vast majority of us, I don't think, can, and I don't think we can just go 18 hours a day. There are people who are going through stuff that I don't even remotely understand. Friends who just got power back within the last 2 or 3 days that they'd been, almost 4 full weeks with no power. And now they're just getting power back and their life's starting to get back to normal. Lack of communication, cell phones weren't working, just very complicated to kind of talk and go. For me, the tension has been, how do I stay plugged in and how do I meet needs when so many people that I literally rub shoulders with every day are hurting? It's not something that I live here and I want to be a part. It is like, these are my friends. These are people that I know. These are businesses that I frequent. I mean, these are places that I'm a part of that are just going through a ton. I've got a friend who, I don't know if I said this in the last episode. It really has been a couple of weeks. But
yeah, it's tough because I've had that same moment. Like, did we say this last time?
Yeah, and I don't think we have at this point said anything but I've got one friend whose son was supposed to go to work that morning. His son had just graduated high school a few months back, and he just said, "Hey, things are supposed to be bad. Why don't you take a day off? Something happens and you lose your job, we'll help you get another job and things." And a few of his coworkers didn't make it out of that. And it's just crazy as a dad. And this is somebody that I love, and I love the family and love those things. Love the people and just the heart of that father to step in and go, "Hey, there's bigger things to worry about today. It looks like it's going to be rough. Why don't we take a day off?" And at the end of the day, it literally, that leading and prompting the Holy Spirit and that father being obedient to that just may have literally saved his kid's life. And so I'm there's a lot of emotion and things for me, trying to help a couple of mission teams that's come in. People come in with skill sets, and that's part of it. If you're just going, "Hey, we don't have certain skill sets, or we can't do," if you get somebody who can do anything, it's kind of easy to find work. You get people who come in with a bunch of heavy equipment. You want to get them to a place that the heavy equipment really meets the need. And it just doesn't just sit in a parking lot. And it can literally take hours a week. I mean, not 2 or 3, like 20, to find work.
Just the organization
of what it is to get things done. And that for me is probably not my best space. That created a ton of, and again, it can sound a little infantile, and I'm just being transparent, but it created a lot of stress and worry on me in some space that I just felt like, man, am I really helping everyone accomplish what needs to be accomplished? So, it's definitely crazy, and I can't imagine. You and I both have friends that are grinding this thing out every day. That they're pastors. They're people in their community that have taken on almost, $100 million project management roles of multiple houses that they're coordinating, licensed contractors and all these things, and they do it taking 60, 80, 90 text messages and phone calls a day. And they're just hitting it. And man, God's really put them in the right place for such a time as this. And I'm really thankful for them. I'm better off being like I'm the person they call and like, "Hey, can you?" And I'm like, "Yes." And so I go and step in when they call and do some things there.
I think we've got this tension between a lot of people jumped on board initially.
Yes.
The first week or two, but now it's back to normal for them. Yet the need is still so great and will continue to be great for the coming weeks and months in this community, that there are so many people that we are connected to, that people have relationships with, that are being impacted. And so the need has not lessened at all. I don't know that the need has lessened in any kind of way, but yet life does have to go on, excuse me. And so even the leaders in these communities are saying, we have to get back to a sense of normalcy. We got to get kids back in school. We've got to get people back to work. We've got to get water back running, electricity back running. I think that it's interesting the number of times that I've had conversations with people who are so upset because they don't have internet.
But it's just like the cell phone thing.
Yeah.
Like so I met a guy this past Sunday. They visited our church, and they live past where the Irwin Hospital is. So they were in a rough spot. They were in a place where things were a little iffy for a while. And in that, like he said, we couldn't get out. we had no way of communication. And he's like, our parents were calling like anybody they could find that was on what would be the Johnson City side of the hospital, who still had cell service, who still had power, who still had an ability, and going, can you somehow like find out if our family's okay? I mean, it's, a couple of, this family has a couple of young kids, and it was just like, this is crazy. And so when we've come to a space and a place that life kind of depends on some of this technology for us to be able to communicate. But like you said, I mean, when I was out riding around town when I was a kid, I mean, it wasn't like we had a set payphone that like, hey, that phone's going to ring at 9:42 and you'd better be there to answer it. It was just, hey, you've got to be home by this point in time, and there will be no talking to you until that happens.
Yeah. Our world's just a different place.
Yeah,
now.
we adapt to those things. But I agree with you. I mean, like on a normal day to day, I'm always kind of like, I mean, we lived that internet before, first world problems and things like that. I think in the middle of a tragedy, it definitely, if people needed internet to be able to communicate with family, do their job, get life, kind of get stuff, order supplies, do whatever they just needed to do, that's one thing. If it was just, and I know this can sound bad because the kids need normalcy as well. If it's just to play Fortnite, though, I probably have less sympathy. But
so you remember back when you did youth ministry, we both did youth ministry, and you would create your small group curriculum, and you had the "Would you rather" questions.
Yes.
In fact, I think that Youth Specialties put out an entire book of "Would you rather."
I have it at home.
Things. Do you? Yeah, I probably still have it on a shelf somewhere tucked away in a file drawer. Okay, so here's one for you: Would you rather live in an era with no running water, no electricity, or no internet?
Oh, definitely no internet. I mean, I'd rather live without internet and have power and water for sure. But
what about no power or no water?
So, I mean, when you say no water, I mean, you're meaning I have to go out and get it out of a well or out of something and carry it back and use it. Yeah, I mean, you're starting to say a lot of things there, though, too, because, I mean, no power. I mean, you're definitely going to choose no water because it's easy to boil water. And if you've got power and they create refrigerators. But see, I mean, there's so many things. You wouldn't have a lot of stuff. You wouldn't have indoor plumbing and those types of things if you're getting back. This is very Little House on the Prairie-ish into that space. So, but Melissa and I watched the first episode of Little House on the Prairie probably a couple months ago now, and we haven't gone back to it. She loves that show, and she wanted to watch it, and so we turned it on. And I'm gonna be honest, it was a long episode. It was almost like a movie for the first episode. It created an immense amount of stress in my life trying to watch them figure out how to live and go. And so I don't know. I'm probably not built for the John Wayne type of living you're wanting to throw me into, but I'm choosing definitely no internet first, and then I'm choosing no water second. I'd rather have to boil water and have electricity and that kind of stuff. I don't know what I'd do with electricity. I mean, you're not going to have TV. You're not going to have a refrigerator. I might be better off with running water and just using gas and stuff or using logs and things to heat the house and run a stove and that kind of stuff.
We have digressed.
Well,
so anyways, back to the dilemma that between all the work that needs to be done and yet the things that need to continue on in life. I had a meeting with a guy who I meet with regularly, a local pastor, and he was talking about the frustration that he's feeling and that his church has responded incredibly well to what's happening in our community. They have really shown the love of Christ and been doing some amazing things. But in doing that, they're looking to him for leadership. And it's been 4 weeks. And so he said, Tony, literally every day, it's 30, 40, 50 phone calls, emails, text messages of saying, hey, we just picked this up. We need you to meet us here. We need you to come here. We've got this project over here. We found this need here. Can you come be here? Can you come be here? And he said, he finally, this past Sunday, got up behind the pulpit and said, I need to have a real honest conversation with you guys. I'm so proud of the way that you have demonstrated Christ's love and been so selflessly generous, overwhelmingly compassionate and generous to our community and to the people around us, but it has to stop. He said, because I've been spending 50, 60, 70 hours a week because you guys are looking to me to do everything, to our church building to be open for stuff to come in. And he said, and I still have to write a sermon every week. I still have to go do hospital visitations every week. I still have a wife and kids that I need to be present in their life. And he said, I'm so proud of what you're doing, but I can't do it anymore. He said, or if this keeps on for even another week, I'm afraid that I'm going to have a complete nervous breakdown and have to be admitted somewhere because I am on the verge of cracking. And he said, just the shock in the eyes of the people in his church as he was saying this on Sunday from the pulpit, until you could begin to see the light switch flipped and then begin to realize and understand, oh yeah, I've called him for this. I called him for this. I called him for this. I called him for this. So I want to go back to you personally, because like I said a few minutes ago, you are right at ground zero in the community that you're serving in. How are you balancing that desire that you have, that compelling nature that you have to meet a need when you see a need, and the fact that you have to take care of yourself, you have to take care of your wife, you have 3 boys that you have to take care of, you have a congregation that needs you in other areas, you have a message to write for this coming weekend, and yet you're surrounded by all of this hurt and all of this need.
Yeah, a little bit of, I think what I'd say the flip side of what you kind of talked about there
Answer my question, Robert Kell.
I'm going to. There's a church in our area that they were doing a lot, and their church was greatly affected. There's a lot of things, and their deacons just looked at their pastor and said, take care of the flock. We'll take care of the building. And I think
pretty biblical there.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, just how they handled that. And what it did is it took this pastor who's very broken and is broken for his community and broken for his congregation, broken for just wanting to see people come to Jesus, but also wanting to see people restored, like his community restored. And he is able to step in and care for the community. And he's got a crew of men and women who are just coming around and dealing with the building things. And it has been really, really, really neat seeing that. For me, I had to kind of go, okay. I mean, I was looking around and I was just kind of watching, and there's a lot of people going back to work, and I'm going, okay, I do have to do my job. In fairness, I get a lot of flexibility to go do what's important in the community in that moment in time. So for where I'm at right now, there's some online things, and I go in and I can sign up. I can go out, I can serve, I can connect, I can plug in, and I can do a couple of days and still be able to do what needs to be done at my job. So I've kind of been able to, at this point in time, I work and I do my job. And then I'm able to, in some evenings, my day off, some other things like that, I can go out and serve and be a part. And for me, those things they're pretty filling in that space. And that can sound bad, but I love coming alongside people. I mean, Sabbath type day off things. I know there's a big part of that's a reconnection and kind of centering our lives back to the Father. For me, a lot of that though, if I'm serving people, so I'll go help friends move or do things like that on my day off, my Sabbath. And it's really restful for me. I love that space. And so for me, going and serving and helping and doing something else that's been big is like our church has been in a place where so many people have been so generous. And not just our congregation. Like when we've created a link where people can give to or something like that, we've all shared that out with friends. People are like, hey. And so we all have, just about everybody feels like has somebody who's gone through something like this. We have friends from Louisiana. And so when we sent this to them, it was just like Katrina all over, and they've all been very generous in things. And so when we see needs, so sometimes my days are delivering the needs we're meeting. And so, oh, hey, they needed this And so we went and we bought that, and it's in my van, and I'm calling people and going, okay, hey, I'm going to deliver this out. And they're like, cool. I'm like, and so I'm running around and doing those things. So that's kind of how it shifted for me. Kind of from point zero for the first 2 weeks, it was just all day, as much as I could find to do, I would do. And I just I wasn't concerned about anything else other than being there. The last week and a half, I would say it's been more of, okay, what are the roles? Having that mission team here, I was out a lot a week ago. So that whole week I was just out. And I was out in the field, and I was out doing things and just being a part. I mean, I was helping fix a breakfast and serve breakfast at 5 a.m. And then I was going until 8 or 9 o'clock at night sometimes. So, I mean, it was just long days. But again, that's really nothing compared to a lot of people having to do. And I got to go home to a house with heat and water and internet and all those things. So yeah, that's where I'm at. Mentally, for me, things that are tough, this is my favorite season of the year. Anytime I can wear shorts, have a hoodie on, that's my jam. When it's just cool enough, I need a toboggan for part of the day, that's it. And now there's just mentally for me a lot of the stuff of like, I know there's little kids sleeping in tents that are up on the mountains that we've already had snow in a couple of our areas and stuff. And so I really want to just continue to help make that. So for me, started out really heavy last week or so, not daily as on the ground doing as much, but finding time to plug in and also leading the church and doing things to be done there.
It's great. I had a conversation with a pastor a couple of weeks ago, and he was telling me about all the things that he was doing personally, not even his church, but just he himself. And his church was not in an area that was particularly hit hard, but he just felt compelled to be out helping, and it was sunrise to sundown type thing, just going for it. And I made the comment to him, man, you're doing a lot. When do you have time to actually do your job? And he looked at me and he said, that is my job. He said, this is my job. And I'm wondering what your response to that would be. What is the church's role in disaster relief? What is a pastor's role in that? Is that their job to be doing that? So much so to where, as the conversation continued, he was saying, this is more important than me writing a sermon. This is more important than me balancing the budget and getting media shout slides ready for the weekend.
Throwing it back right there.
Yeah,
media
right.
shout, 1998.
What's your response to that?
So I think my situation is unique, and a network of churches. I've got 2 or 3 guys that I could just say, I don't want to speak for the next 3 weeks, and they would come speak. They understand what's happening. They understand what's going on. We teach inside of series. They could all rotate and teach their sermon for 3 weeks, and what we're doing right now wouldn't affect anybody as far as the order and the rhythm of what's going on. So I want to say up front, like when I'm about to say a couple things, I'm saying I'm in a space to where I have a crew. I've got a lead pastor who has sat with me at least one day a week and just, hey, how are you doing? What can we do? How can I come alongside you? When everything happened, we had an event we were doing on a Sunday night, and he said, do I need to get somebody else? And I said, no, that's a couple weeks out. I think I'll be okay. But like, he was just, they've been super caring. And again, small area. So a lot of them have friends and family that were very affected in this as well. So I took and still take, like I will say, something I've talked about is like, I've looked this a little bit as my bivocational days, when like the Lord was faithful in sermon writing and things like that. And he's been very faithful in that now as well. The last couple of weeks, especially, I think I put time in on sermons. It wasn't like I got up there and just said, here's a message from the Lord from Deuteronomy 6, let's get it. But, and I just read verses and hope something comes up. I have put time in. I know it's not been as much time as I would have normally done, but there has been a level of trusting the Father that, hey, I feel like that this is a moment where I need to be like ox in a ditch. I know that's probably a terrible analogy, but like people's oxes are in a ditch. There's people who need me to be the hands and feet. And I feel like Jesus was out more concerned about people than he was writing sermons. And so we took a Sunday off one time. Some people were great with that. Some people maybe not so much. I still think it was the right thing to do, and I'd do it again. If things got hit, we took a Sunday off because we literally, right in front of our church is the only access to the south side of town. When you get an interstate out, we have this little tiny town that's not really even designed for some of the big pickups we have that drive through, these guys that jack them up that look like monster trucks. They barely fit down our road. Downtown was shut down for almost an hour one day about a week or so ago because an 18-wheeler took a turn too short, got on the wrong road, and hit the pole. That, like, our traffic lights are held up by poles, not by a wire that runs across. I mean, it's just a different space, different town. And so we didn't meet because there was still a boil notice on. Like, we just didn't want to clog up by putting 40 or 50 cars downtown, and blocking the streets. It was hard to find parking. People were doing a lot. And so, how do we put feet on the ground? And that's what we did. And so I'm okay with that mentality. And I actually think it's probably where Jesus would have been, which is why like I said, I'm still in a space where, I probably live in a touch of a tyranny of the urgent, which I know is not all that's used as a negative leadership principle a lot of times. But if somebody calls and there's a real need, I'm willing to put my day on the back burner to meet that need, if at all possible.
I think we've got a tale of four cities going on here. Is that just in what we've talked about today?
I thought it was a tale of two cities.
Well, it was, but I made it four because we've got more than that.
I'm excited to hear this now. You're writing a new book.
Just in what we've talked about here, we've got one pastor who says, this is my job. This is more important than anything else that I'm doing. But then I haven't talked to him since then. So it's been 2.5 weeks since I talked to him. I want to know, is that still your mindset? Is that still what you're doing? Because the need hasn't lessened any, as we've talked. And maybe it is. Maybe it is. I don't think he listens to this show. So you've got him.
Well, and we're not saying anything negative. I mean, like, it's just, I'd love to, if he is listening, tell you. I'd love to know.
Yeah. And so you've got that situation there. Then you've got the other guy that I met with that said, I'm drowning because there's so much need that I need a break. I need a break from it. Then you've got other churches and then you've got some that were really active at the beginning, but now they've tapered off a little bit. And then you've got some that have not done anything. You've got a lot of churches in this area. In fact, I heard someone make the comment the other day that if all the churches in our region, if all the Christians in our region had stepped up and done their share, we could have looked a whole lot. But there are a lot of churches, some that are even in some of the hardest hit areas, that they just went on business as usual. They've done nothing. And so I'll go back to the question I asked a while ago. What is the church's role? And what should the church's role be in this? Is one of those right and one of those wrong? Is there somewhere in the middle? Is it circumstantial? What is the church's role in a disaster situation?
Like, theologically, of looking at disaster, I don't know. I mean, just being transparent, I haven't really gone through and created a theology of disaster relief. I'm sure there's organizations and Christian organizations that do disaster relief that have a really good theology of that. And so I don't have that space. What I do see in the person we're supposed to model our lives after is he stepped in. And fourth city. Sorry to interrupt you. Fourth city is your guy who the church said, we'll take care of this stuff. Yeah. You take care of the people of our church. Yeah. I think that's probably as healthy of a response. And, they're in a tough spot because their church was greatly affected. And so a lot of their boots on the ground have been not just in their community, but it's been in their space. But that's okay. I would say, just looking my mindset, in the scriptures would be that we should be, if you've done nothing, I feel like you've missed the whole point of scripture. I mean, if you, especially if you live in this area, I mean,
do you think that it's the responsibility of the church, capital T, capital C, to strap on their boots, put on their gloves, and get out and actually be a physical presence in the time of need? Or is offering hope and spiritual guidance to those that are hurting, wounded, and lost the role of the church in times of tragedy?
I believe, for me, I don't know that it's a tough question to answer. I'm trying to figure out how I want to word the couple of things I'm getting ready to say. So if you haven't even taken up a bottle of water, I think you've just missed the entire purpose of what Jesus is about. I would say the church should be out. I would say the church should put on gloves and get some boots. And if physically you're not able to do that, there's spaces they can step in. I spoke at a
church a couple of weeks ago that there was not a person in the church that had the capability physically to grab a shovel and go out and start mucking a road or a home out. There wasn't anyone in there that had that physical capability. But they could be a place to open their doors and be a place for those that are hurting. They could provide resources for their community. And so I think that there are different ways that you can help. There are different ways that you can serve. There are different opportunities out there. I think the big thing is just do something.
Yeah. And I mean, taking up supplies and doing all those things. There's a lot of churches that stepped in and did that. And those were huge needs. I mean, you think about the place you were picking supplies up when we told the story of the bridge, and things. If that church hadn't mobilized as quickly as they did, can you imagine how many people would not have had resources and things at their disposal? So, I mean, this was a huge way for the church to be feet on the ground. And the mission team that came in, they had one lady that was 80 and another one that was like in their 70s that, yeah, they weren't mucking out buildings. And I mean, and there were some men and teenagers that were there and doing that were like really getting it inside of that space. But there were limbs and things at a couple of the places we were working at, and they drug limbs to a fire pit and they tossed them in the bonfire, and like they stayed busy and they moved. There were moments where they were making sure that the team was taken care of. So yeah, I get it. Like, honestly, I mucked out a couple of times, and I just handed the shovel to people who were younger and faster, because I'm willing to do whatever. And if I'm all the help you've got, I will be the help I can be. But if you put me up against a 24-year-old, I can't move that fast. And that's just reality. And so that's the thing. I think one of the beauties of, to be way off topic, one of the beauties of watching LeBron James is just the longevity of his career and how he still competes with guys that are in their early and mid 20s, and he's 40. I'm almost 50 and cannot compete with guys that are 30. So, I mean, I'm okay with that. And I'm not saying it's there. I'm just saying that like we had a responsibility and have a responsibility to continue. And I don't disagree at all with the fact of that. I don't know what the number is. Is it $1? Is it $10? Is it $100? But if every person who says they're a Christian in the Tri-Cities would have, given $1, $10, $100, I mean, we could have rebuilt every home in this area for every person that lost what they lost, that didn't have flood insurance or that didn't live in a flood zone, that got hit and things. So many businesses, so many homes that are hurting. I just think there's a lot of ways we can help. And if the church did not help, big C or little c, I think that they missed the point of the scriptures.
So I want to kind of shift a little bit, because we've got the vast majority, the majority of our audience is not in this area.
Yeah.
And so maybe they've already tuned out and not listening to this episode because they feel like it doesn't relate to them. Something that I want to talk about, and we've touched on this on both episodes, is that the reason that there was such devastation in our region, in our area, is because we weren't prepared for it, because no one expected this to happen. It's not happened in over 100 years. what responsibility should churches have? Is there a responsibility that churches should have to have a disaster plan in place for when the unexpected takes place, that they can respond? Because I think that was something that we've talked about in our previous episode on this, that church that my family went and worked at 2 days after the devastation. They didn't have a clue what they were doing, but they were doing it. And it was raw, it was erratic, it was confusing and disorganized at times, but they were doing something. What if they had a plan already in place that regardless of what the disaster is it a hurricane, is it a tornado, is it a fire, is it an earthquake, is it a nuclear attack? I mean,
we do have a nuclear plant right across the street from that church you were at.
That there is a plan, that they're prepared in some way. They have a shell of a plan that's ready to go. Is that something that churches, regardless of where they're at, should have a plan in place on how they can respond in times of crisis?
So I think it's tough. I mean, because the one thing I would say is that if every church would have tried to do what the 2 or 3 churches we're talking about would have tried to do, it would have been way worse. So I don't know if it's a church by church plan.
Well, we saw that, right? We saw that over the coming weeks, that every church, every school, every firehouse, everywhere you went, we're a drop-off center. And now you're driving around. Driving around yesterday, you're seeing building after building with stacks and stacks and stacks of water outside of their building. And you've got people that are posting on social media saying, come get water. If you need it or not, come get water. It's a gift. Come get it. We've got an abundance of water because everyone jumped on the bandwagon of let's be a distribution site. And a lot of them were completely unregulated at all. We had one, I don't remember if I told the story or not, and I'm sorry that I cut you off and we're digressing again. But we had one church that I was having lunch with one of the leaders of the church a couple of weeks ago, and they said, people just came in our parking lot and set up a distribution site and didn't come and talk to us. And we had to go out and say, what are you doing? And said, oh, we're collecting for hurricane relief, collecting supplies. And I said, do you go to church here? No. You're just a big parking lot. And so they were like, no, you can't do this. You can't just come onto our property and set up what's happening with all of this stuff when you collect it all. I mean, they're on a major street, and the people had big signs saying drop off center. Like, you can't do this. And so you're right. We saw a small scale sample size of that people just started setting this up everywhere, and it kind of turned into chaos.
Yeah. And then there's a couple people that I've seen. There's one person in particular, he and his family, I mean, he's just kind of taken a very personal approach to this. And so he's got some resources, and he, when you have resources, you tend to have friends who have resources. And so he'll make a post and he'll be like, hey, need to buy a car, $5,000. And literally 45 minutes later, he's been Venmo'd $5,000. And it's unbelievable what this kingdom-minded, Christ-following person who is, and again, I'm not saying there's people, I know there's people out there who don't care that the Bible is even on the planet that are doing a lot of good as well. I'm just saying this person, is because we're talking about the church, big C and little c. This is a big C person who is out there on his own, had the resources, started saying, hey, I'm going to go buy every gas can at this place and fill it with gas. Who wants to jump in with me? This is my Venmo. That people would shoot him. He's like, awesome. I bought 100 gas cans. Here we go. Hey, we're taking 100 propane tanks. Who wants to buy one? And people just respond. And in 30 minutes, he's got all the money he needs to do those things. I mean, I've even seen him say like, hey, what would it take to rebuild every house in Tennessee that was destroyed by this? Let's get to work. And he's like got people like really processing through how much money would we need? What would we have to do? And how can we start to put this together? This is one person who had no, and if you'd have seen his first message, like we were sitting around, We're going, we don't know what to do, but we got to do something. Here we go. And that's been the thing. And so I think it would have to almost be more of a regional plan. Like my question would be is, excuse me, does New Orleans now, after Katrina, after things like that, do they have a citywide plan that when this happens, that parking lot is open, this shelter is open, this space is ready, that stuff just immediately goes there? Or is there still a little bit of organized chaos? And I just don't know that we can take. I think there's a lot of beauty.
I think there's organized chaos, but I think the key word there is it's organized chaos.
And so I think that the couple of churches and of course the high school that we're talking about, I think there was a ton of chaos. I don't think they totally knew what they were going to do, but they had an infrastructure and the people around that they were like, we can manage this. And so they have taken and done these things and just really stepped in and gone from there. And so I don't know that there has to be these crazy strategies. I think it has to be more of a heart and a willingness to step in and go.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that there could have been a lot of confusion staved off if there had been at least the framework of a plan. And so I think it's maybe not a bad idea for churches to say, hey, we've got some people that this is kind of up their alley, and maybe we never use them. But people all over organizations have an emergency response plan, right? And so why not churches have an emergency response plan that if this happens, here's how we're going to step up and help. Here's how we can not be scrambling at 6 a.m. trying to figure out what we do, that we already know what we're going to do. And maybe we never have to use this plan. And I'm not saying have an entire committee that meets once a month to revise. I'm not saying doing drills, to practice what you're going to do in these situations, but at least having something that, hey, this just happened. I can pull out a file and we've got a plan in place of here's what we're doing and here's how we're making it happen. I think is maybe not a bad idea to spend a couple of hours putting something together. And you're a big AI fan. I'm sure that ChatGPT could probably create something for you in 10 minutes.
We had to have a lot of that stuff when I was at the Y. And so there's just those spaces that, but these were things that were a touch more of a reality that, hey, this kind of stuff happens quite often in buildings and in spaces and stuff like that. And how do you handle? And it was more like, it was fire drills and things. How do you get kids from point A to point B if the building's on fire? What do you do if there is a tornado or something along those lines? And so, yeah, I don't know. I mean, we probably are, there's a middle ground that we both probably are like, yeah, there's a level of organization. I think you would probably want to be a touch more organized than I would think is realistic, especially with the size of most of the churches that we have in our region and our area. But yeah, I mean, I still look at, and I just think one of the things that's been cool and interesting is just people have kind of just gone, this has been insane. And I'm like, you've never had a hurricane happen to Appalachian people. And, and it has been such a great response.
Yeah. So again, I want to wrap this up. We've spent almost an hour again on this, and it's been good to talk about this 4 weeks removed from the actual event taking place, but the event is ongoing and will be ongoing for several weeks, months, and maybe even years when you look at the rebuilding process. If you're listening to this, if you made it this far, and maybe you're in an area that was affected, maybe you're in an area that completely wasn't affected, what are some things that you can do from your seat right now? If you would like to volunteer, I would say connect with local relief organizations, local churches or volunteer groups, and finding a way that you can grab some gloves and lace up your boots and get to work. If you would like to donate, find a reputable disaster relief organization, someone that you trust, that has a history, and that you know that your donation is going to get into the hands that it needs to be into. And we talked about this at the beginning of the episode. No matter where you're at, no matter what your physical capabilities, you have the ability to hit your knees in prayer. And committing to pray for the people that are affected, for the first responders and for the volunteers that are on the ground, for the churches that are providing spiritual guidance and comfort and hope to the people that are still reeling from this, and all the families that are impacted. Prayer is something that we believe very strongly works. So please continue to do that. Keep that going. We do want to thank you for listening to the very first edition of the Pulpit and Porch. And we hope that you've enjoyed sitting down on the porch with us and having a conversation, listening in on our conversation. Hope that you have a great rest of your week. Again, check out the liner notes for how you can get involved. We'll have some ideas there, and how you can watch the memorial service for our dear, dear friend, Dr. Bruce Montgomery. We love you. Connect with us on higherministries.com on Facebook. Join the conversation. We would love to hear the stories of resilience, of hope, and of the love of Christ being spread to those in need. We'll talk to you next week.